The Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario have filed a human rights complaint against Public Safety Canada. The president of the group, who heads up the Treaty 3 police service, says Ottawa's chronic underfunding of police in their communities amounts to discrimination. Jessica Clement has the details.
The complaint, which was filed on March 29th for the 9 First Nations police services in Ontario, is seeking $40,000 in damages per person for those living in communities served by First Nations police. It takes issue with the 1991 First Nations and Inuit policing program the federal government uses to fund its services, with many First Nations leaders saying it's suffering from a lack of resources. Kai Liu is the chief of Treaty 3 Police and also the president of the Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario. He says the finite amount of money in its budget has led to an underfunding of police, which has created ongoing challenges for First Nations policing services, including leaving various communities unpoliced.
When someone calls the Treaty 3 police, it could take anywhere from 1 hour to 3 hours for our officers to respond. We simply do not have enough officers to have officers in every one of our 23 communities 24/7.
The program is governed by an underlying First Nations policing policy, which requires at minimum that First Nations benefit from the same standard of policing available to non-Indigenous communities. The complaint, which has been backed by the First Nations Police Service, states that the country has failed to deliver on those standards. The federal government previously said they would enact changes and declare First Nations policing an essential service. However, last week, the federal government has backed away from setting any timeline. Liu says he's not surprised that the timeline has been pushed back. He also says he doesn't see how the essential services legislation will automatically fix the chronic underfunding.
If Canada is not willing to come to the negotiation table and adequately fund our current police services, I don't know how, if tomorrow there was an essential service legislation, how that would change the chronic underfunding.
Liu is hoping they'll be able to sit down and negotiate with Public Safety Canada so that the First Nation communities can receive the same level of policing that non-Indigenous communities receive.
The ability to call the police and have the police respond in a reasonable timeline, I don't think it's too much to ask. And our hope is that by working together with our federal government, that we could come to, we can find solutions that will provide the safety within our First Nation communities.
The Chiefs of Ontario and the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association have added their support and plan to seek intervener status. Jessica Clement, TBT News.